when I was posting on Instagram and I was posting all this stuff. So they basically were like, look, you have to have your content reviewed before you post it because you're posting on behalf of us and we need to review it. And I thought about that. I was like, it's pretty interesting. Nobody reviews my cases.
Right.
Right. Like, you practice law. We don't care. Do that. And that's where you can cause millions of dollars of damage. But you can put something on Instagram. That's got to go through like 6 people.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode, The Defense Never Rests. I am your host, Meghan Henry. And today I have on Mike Akins. And Mike is a labor and employment attorney, but I had asked Mike to come on because he has his own podcast. He runs his own law firm, MLE Law, and he really puts himself out there on LinkedIn and all these social media channels. So I kind of just wanted to pick his brain about his process. And he's just a fun guy to talk to. So with that, let's bring him in. Good morning, Michael. Thank you so much for coming on Defense Never Rests. I'm so happy to have you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So I'm excited to chat with you because you also have a podcast. So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit too. But before we do, everyone I have on, I tend to ask them about how they got to where they are now, because I find the story so interesting. Everyone ends up where they are for a variety of different reasons. But you're a practicing attorney, and everyone has a different story of why they decided to become an attorney. So, what's your story? How did you decide that you wanted to go to law school, and how did you end up in this practice area that you're in now?
Wow, that's so we're going to go back a ways.
Yeah, we're going back.
We're going back. I kind of always thought being a lawyer would be a cool thing. So I came from a family, like my immediate parent, my nuclear family, or my parents, they didn't go to college, right? But there are people on my dad's side of the family that did, nobody on my mom's side. So, education was stressed, but not stressed enough. And I was kind of a stupid kid who was immature and did a bunch of dumb stuff. And I was like, yeah, I think I could be a lawyer, but I really had I did not have the maturity to understand, okay, you got to get into a good law school. You got to do well in high school. So I didn't do any of those things. Right. So I was kind of an idiot and did pretty terrible in high school. And then, I don't know, by the grace of God, got into a 4-year college. I still to this day, I'm like, how did that happen? It was pretty pathetic. And then still didn't learn in college and did pretty terrible in college. And so I graduated college and I get a job. I get a job working as an assistant manager at Abercrombie and Fitch in the mall. I hate that job, right? I hate it. I'm depressed because I was a lot of fun in college. So I didn't do well. But I was president of my fraternity and I did homecoming and Greek week and all the things, right? So I had a whole thing going there. And then when you graduate college, that ends, right? That's over. You're nobody. Now you're just the old creepy guy that comes around the fraternity house. And I didn't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
So I'm an assistant manager. I know this is a long story, but it kind of all plays.
No, I like it. Keep going.
And I hate the job. And so, and this kind of ties into being a labor and employment lawyer, right? I hate the job and I do a terrible job and I am appropriately fired quickly. And, most people, when they get fired, right, I've never met anybody actually who's been like, oh yeah, I totally should have been fired. That's never happened in my life. And maybe it hasn't happened to listeners, but I'm telling you 100% I deserved to be fired. So now I wasn't for anything nefarious. I would just show up late. I wouldn't fold the shirts at the end of the night. I'd leave the store a mess because I didn't care and they fired me. So now I'm an unemployed college grad with a poli-sci degree and really no prospects of anything exciting. So I get a job waiting tables. I go back. I was working at Home Depot through college. So I go back to Home Depot. So I'm working at Home Depot and I'm waiting tables, which by the way, are both great pursuits. But I was like, wow, I graduated college. What happened? So I say, you know what? I'm going to take the LSAT because why not? I got to do something. And I always wanted to be a lawyer. And I realized, obviously, I'm not going to go to Harvard. That's not happening. I take the LSAT and I do pretty decent, actually, not bad. And by the grace of God, I get into law school. I still don't really know how that happened either, but I got in. So I became a lawyer really out of necessity, right? Like, I mean, it's something I had thought about doing when I was younger, but took no action to actually do that because I was a dumb, immature kid and I didn't have any guidance. And that's my fault, right? I'm sure I could have done better in high school. Plenty of kids do, right? Plenty of kids have that maturity. I was stupid. So in the younger letter to my younger self, right, it's, you probably should like take some stuff more seriously. So it was out of necessity. And I figured this would make sense for me. I could always, pretty logical, but I kind of just needed to do something. And law school seemed like a smart move it seemed like the first smart move in a series of really stupid moves. And then finally, when I got into law school, I finally said, okay, you're here. I went to St. Thomas University and God bless them. I love that place. I got a great education. I really did. But look, it is what it is. It's a 4th tier law school. That's what it is. So the job opportunities are going to be limited unless you're at the top of your class. I'm not knocking the school. I live in reality. I'm a litigator, so I have to live in reality. I'm not here to say, oh, well, the rankings are stupid. Look, they are what they are.
Yeah.
So I knew, all right, you're here. You got into an accredited law school. You better do well because, you're not going to get another chance. This is it. And so I hunkered down and by the grace of God, well, this time by hard work, I did really well. And was able to participate in the on-campus interview process and do all of that stuff, the law review, and the MOOC, all the things, right? And got the grades and all that good stuff. And I got a job at a boutique, now no longer in existence, boutique sort of silk stocking firm that was called Muller Mintz, which was a labor and employment management firm. I don't know how I got that job. I had no idea what labor and employment was. I didn't know labor and unions and all that. But I remember the interview process clear as day. And that was a life-changing moment. I met some people that would be part of my life for the last 20 odd years of this ride. And so people always say, oh, how did you get labor and employment law? Like, how did you pick that? I didn't pick anything. What are you talking about? Pick.
I got an offer and I took it.
Yeah, I got a summer clerkship and I took it. And it just happened to be that it was employment law, which is tremendous. It was just all, I guess they say stars align. I don't know if that's true. And I actually got that offer because I remember there was on-campus interviewing and I did a bunch of that, but there was a lot of law firms that wouldn't interview at my school because we're just bottom school, right? So they'd go to UM, they go to Florida, they go to Florida State. And then I was at St. Thomas and there was a kind of a companion 4th tier school, Nova. Some would go and some wouldn't. So I remember sitting in the law review office, like late with, this is 1998 or 99 or whatever year it was. And like labeling envelope after envelope and sending mass amounts of resumes and stuff out. And that's how I got this interview, was by sending in a cover letter and a resume and a writing sample. So I do the summer clerkship. It's really hard, right? It's not, I was like, remember getting papers back, like dripping red ink. And, I think I messed something up. I was like, what? I didn't think I did anything right. And I distinctly remember this coming back after the summer to we had a law review meeting before I think the 3rd year started. Yeah, because you do the summer clerkship. I don't remember what year it was. But my best friend, who I'm still friends with to this day and I practice law with, comes up to me. He's like, how'd it go this summer? We weren't best friends then, but we were pretty tight. We both did really well. And so we were kind of friendly competitors for grades and stuff, although he always did a little bit better than I did. He comes up to me. He's like, how did your clerkship go? Like, what happened? I was like, no way I'm getting an offer. Like, it was terrible. I sucked. I couldn't do anything right, but I was like very humble about it. And, was finally had some maturity. I was like, look, I learned a lot and it was a great experience. And so I'll know I'll carry that experience with me. And then I got an offer. I was like, what? So I got an offer. I was like, oh, that's great. And I ended up working for this team that I would end up working with for a very long time, not initially at that firm. I would only be there a short amount of time, actually, because I'm entrepreneurial. I kind of didn't know that at the time, but I would end up going back to work with them. And my mentor was on that team. And that's a whole separate conversation. But that's how it started. I got the offer. I mean, I didn't pick labor and employment, but I did love it. I knew even if I didn't work at that firm, I was going to do employment law.
Yeah.
So that's,
I mean, I feel like that's such the case for, I mean, it was the case for me, like when I was graduating law school, I was just going to take anything that I could get. The market was so bad at that time. Like I graduated at a time that a lot of people, that's when they were cutting the big law salaries and people weren't like starting, and it was a whole issue. So I graduated and I had a summer clerkship, and that firm that summer decided we can't take on our summers. So I was like, so like that whole thing that you're like, shit, like at least they didn't tell me it had to do with my work product. Maybe it did, but they didn't hire any of us.
Oh, then you're okay. Then you're okay.
So maybe we all sucked, or they really truly didn't have a position. But then you're starting again at point zero, having to look for a job. And then the job market tanked. So for the first year, I just did like contract review. I was a contract attorney and did like document review.
Yeah.
And talk about something that like just will defeat you. Because at the time, I felt like you were treated as like a second, third class citizen. Like if they could put you further in the basement, they would.
It's not what you envisioned, right? When you went to law school, like sitting there reviewing documents.
Oh no. And thankfully I tried to, I utilized every single portion of my network I could, and did the same thing you did. I was like sending out hard copies of resumes, sticking the labels on them, talking to every single person I knew from my college to like introduce me to other lawyers in the area so I could get in front of people. And it took a year, and I ended up in litigation. Wow. Yeah. Oh yeah. And I ended up in litigation because that was the only jobs out there. Like when I went to law school, I thought, I'm going to go into like I don't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to contract or patent law. I was all over the place, but when it boiled down to it, the jobs were litigation. So that's why I'm in litigation.
And I always wanted to do litigation when I started. I knew that. Like I knew I wanted to be in court. I didn't understand what that meant before I went to law school. I didn't understand that like in federal court, you're actually not really in court. Although ironically, that's my favorite place to be now is federal court. So so it worked out. That's an interesting, I didn't have that issue because when I was job hunting or in the mix, it was like the heyday. It was pre 9/11, and it was, the heyday of, and I didn't go to a big firm. The firm I went to ended up getting gobbled up by a big firm shortly thereafter, and was kind of considered like big firm-ish. In fact, I tell people the firm I started with was very much like the firm in the movie, The Firm. I mean, that's what it was like. And there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that. They had tremendously high turnover from associates. It was just a hard place to work. So it was kind of like a badge of honor if you survived there and made it through and if they liked you. So that felt pretty good. But that was pre the big law crash.
Yeah. Right. And that's like when I got out.
Right.
So, did you, I noticed this too in law school, that going into law school, being not straight from college, I think works to your advantage. Cause I think you take it a little bit more seriously. It's not an extension of the fun. And I think you just come in with a little bit of more of a work ethic. Like I had the same thing. I had a 3-year break. And while I probably should have had a little more fun than I did, but I knew how much it was costing and I knew how important it was to get a job, and look how it worked out anyway. I came out without a job anyway, but but maybe that's why I should have had more fun. But, I just felt like that, some of my other friends who came straight from college had they approached it a little bit differently, and they're all equally as, plenty successful and stuff, but they probably had way more fun than I did in law school.
So I did end up going right from college. I didn't have like a couple year break. So my kind of crash and burn after college was a very, like, I guess, precipitous fall. Was that the right word? Like it was quick. So I graduated college. I took this job I graduated in May, and I was in law school by August, but in between there, I was quickly fired from the assistant manager at Abercrombie & Fitch job because I was, again, terrible at it. I mean, I was so bad at that job. And then I went and got a job waiting tables, took the LSAT, and then right to law school. So I didn't have the break, but I had enough fun in college, right? Like I had to do what I could not screw this up because I had no fallback. I didn't have, my parents were not going to be able to assist me. We just didn't, my family was not capable of that. We're more of a blue collar family. And I didn't have any, I had no backup plan, right? If it didn't work out, I didn't know what I would do because I had a political science degree and nobody told me. Maybe I should have looked it up because, again, I was lazy. So it's my fault that, that degree is kind of worthless from a practical standpoint. And if I had known I was going to go to law school and I had done some research and been smart and, taken any semblance of like my own action, I would have realized it doesn't matter what your major is, just take something where you can really excel and that'll help you. But I did none of those things. So it was, I had no choice but to make this work. That was it. But luckily I knew that. Luckily, when I got there, I was like, look, you can't be, and it was in Miami, right? So there's all the temptations, right? And all these guys are going out to South Beach and I couldn't do any of that stuff. I had to hunker down and study and do all the things. So but I did notice those that were in my class that took some time off were in the real world a little bit and then went to law school were significantly more focused, for sure.
Yeah. I remember we had some people who like were practicing doctors who decided
we had one of those.
Yeah. Which I was like, really? Like I'm impressed, super impressed, but I was like, you went through all of that and you just wanted to come and do more? Like, but now they're, they're like ultra successul, but still.
We had two of them and they weren't shy about telling you that they were doctors, which was, it was great. Super fun.
So you had mentioned, so you found out that you had this entrepreneurial nature to you. So when did you discover that? Did you eventually break off and start your own firm?
I did. Not this firm that I currently have. I'm working at the labor and employment little silk stocking boutique firm. And again, this is pre big law crash. This is pre all that, right? So it's in the era of associates should kind of be seen and only heard when and if we summon you from your office. But beyond that, like, do what you're told, do it well, don't have any typos, and we won't feed you to the lions. That was the world. I mean, that's obviously an exaggeration, but not much. But I was sort of out and about in my community a little bit, and I had some opportunities to bring some business in. And it wasn't a ton of business, but it was something. It was two different companies that would have a significant amount of work. And I remember bringing the business in, and there was not a lot of excitement about that. It was actually a little bit more like, I remember a meeting where I was told, and this is going back now, what was that, 2001 or 2? So, I mean, we're going back 20 years, but I was told, this is great and good job, but slow down a little. You have a lot to learn. And, you just need to slow things down. And I remember thinking, wait a minute.
Why?
I'm making you money. Like, I don't understand. What do you mean? And that theme of you go too fast, slow down would become a theme later from some of the same people that it took me a while to be like, wait a minute, people talking about. So I thought that was really weird, but I was like, okay. And I just didn't quite get it. And now I get it, right? That was fear. I mean, that was like big law, old guard. Even though I wasn't at big law, it was the same thing. That was big law, old guard, making sure that they stayed what they were. Because if you keep, if you let somebody roll, if you don't have fear, you let them roll because you benefit from it too. But they didn't think that way. They just didn't.
Right.
They thought completely opposite. So then I had some more business come in, but I knew they wouldn't take it because we were labor and employment management defense only. So there was no room to do any kind of regular business litigation of any sort. We were not allowed. which also didn't make a lot of sense to me because I felt like that would spin off more labor and employment work. But again, I couldn't voice that to them. That would not have been gone over well. So I quit. And this is in 2003.
Well, you did voice it. You just did it a different way.
Yeah, I was like, look, I'm gonna open my own firm. Yeah. They told me I was crazy and all the things. And so in 2003, a mere 2 years in, I opened up my own firm and this is pre-social media, right? So I had 2 clients, not a lot of money. And that turned out to be the best thing I ever did, even though that also was a learning experience. So I opened up my own firm and it's actually successful, right? Like we start making money, like we're doing really well. I had a partner. So while I was smart enough to sort of figure out the law school thing and I was really good at practicing law, I was not good at business because I had no business experience.
Sure.
And I was too arrogant and jerky and cocky to get some help, right? Because I knew everything now. Like, oh, I figured this out. Like I dug myself out of my hole after college. So I got all the answers. And did not have all the answers. So I was terrible at managing that firm, although it probably would have worked. And then Hurricane Wilma hit. Okay. And it crushed Broward County, Florida. I mean, crushed us, but it really crushed our firm because there was a big office building in Fort Lauderdale. There weren't many at the time, but we were in one of them. And it ripped a hole, completely ripped open a big, humongous hole in a side of the building.
Oh man. And this is pre being able to like remote work was not really a thing.
That was not a thing. Yeah, that was not, although it was all internet and stuff, but no remote work.
Yeah.
I mean, we had remote work, but it wasn't good. It was not a good way to be.
Yeah. You had computers. It wasn't stone tablets.
Yeah. This was 2005 and we had no business interruption insurance. And that then started a series of just terrible decisions on my part from a business standpoint. So my partner at the time decided she wanted to go to Fort Myers and get married and have babies and do a bunch of different things. And I said, I don't really want to do this alone. So I had a bunch of business. That was never the issue. So I went into Fowler White as a partner at like 31 or 32 years old, which sort of worked out perfect.
Yeah.
And this was around 2007. That's when we closed the firm. And now that I look back, I was like, well, I probably could have kept that firm open, but it made sense to go in and kind of regroup. And was able to take care of everything with the firm. I mean, there was nothing bad that happened. I mean, there were no debts. There was none of those things. It just wasn't, we should have had business interruption insurance, right? Like we should have been prepared for a whole bunch of things we weren't prepared for. And, I was just a dumb kid still running around South Florida now with some money in my pocket, which is a terrible thing. And just being stupid. Although I was smart enough to buy some property and smart enough to get my first dog and did a couple good things. Yeah. I still have my first dog. She's 16 now, actually. So I went in to Fowler White as a partner, which I ended up getting that job, ironically, from some of the people that I had worked with at that original firm. I still stayed in touch with them. There was one of the guys on my team was sort of like my mentor still and had become a really good friend. So I jumped to Fowler White and I was back in firm life, but it was a little different because I got to go in as a partner and had some business and, working at a firm as a partner was dramatically different than my associate experience initially. Although I got some snickers and some leers because I was a little younger to be a partner. It was not much, not dramatically, but a little bit younger.
But you had the business to back it up. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's not like you came in and demanded to be partner and you didn't have anything to bring to the table. You had clients.
Yeah. And maybe I should clarify, because I'm sure there's lawyers that listen to this. I was not an equity partner, right? I was partner in name only. So I got to put that name on a business card. I got more money at the end of the year than people that were not partners, but by no means was I an equity partner. I didn't have that kind of business.
But let's face it, like having that name on your card helps, like for it to generate more business. I just some people.
I think then it did, I think back then it did for sure.
Yeah, I think it may have shifted now a little bit away from that, but I think that title, even for me, was important from a marketing business standpoint because you just seem more established and you seem like I think that perception is kind of going away. Totally.
And I'm sorry, I'm looking down only because I'm turning my air conditioning on. I'm not ignoring it. And it's South Florida, and it was 50 degrees this morning, so I had the heat on, and now it's 70 degrees, and it's 78 in my room right now. So I'm just using my phone to turn the air conditioner on. I'm not like texting or anything like that.
I got to make sure my heat is on. It's 32 degrees here. So
where are you?
I'm in Jersey, in South Jersey, right outside.
Okay. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, so I had to.
Yeah,
I'm like sweltering here. It's like I got to turn the air on.
Yeah, I'm jealous. My mom, flies south to Siesta Key for the winter,
Okay.
and she's already in siesta, and she's probably going to water aerobics this morning or something.
Nice. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you. I was looking down, and I didn't want you to think I was being rude.
You weren't. But yeah, so I mean, I think that partner title does, it does mean something at some, like, especially at the early I guess mid stages of your career when you're trying to build your business. I think a lot of potential clients like when they're dealing with a partner and not an associate.
I think it mattered then.
Yeah.
Now, well, I think it matters, I guess, how you sell yourself. I'm trying to think. Now, I don't think it matters as much with the difference in the world today. At the end of the day, like, someone's hiring you.
I agree.
I think it could become a problem. I think it becomes a problem if you have a relationship with someone and you're trying to bring work in, and you end up having to tell them, well, let me check with so-and-so on bringing this in. It could create a situation where they're like, what do you mean you have to check with somebody? Like, what are you talking about? But
right. Yeah.
I think the industry is, as much as I rant about it, is changing dramatically from that traditional model, so to speak.
And I think it's a positive, though, too.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
It's a positive. I think it's a shift. And I mean, I think I probably said this a bazillion times on this podcast, but I think COVID actually kind of helped a little bit with that shift, because it changes how we interact, how we market. It's not the same, like, old school mentality, like we have to go to dinner, we have to, like, those things. I think some people are doing, and some people are successful at doing. I personally am happy that we are kind of moving away from that and interacting in different ways. And it's easier, it's more efficient. And I actually think you probably develop better relationships.
I completely agree. I mean, when I opened MLE Law in 2019, it was pre-COVID, but the whole message behind my firm, even if you go to my website, is, this is not your father's law firm, right? So we do things totally differently than the marketplace traditionally does them. And one of those things was we were, completely remote. And when COVID hit, for me, it was just another day at the office, even though the world was falling apart and all that was happening, but I had no interruption from a work standpoint. So I was able to leverage that, because while other firms had to spend a lot of time scrambling to figure out how they're going to manage these behemoths from a work from home standpoint, I was pushing COVID-19 content basically from the day it happened. Yeah. And that was, through Facebook Lives, Instagram Live, LinkedIn, all of it. And I was able to leverage that tremendously. So I was a little bit ahead. And it helped out. And I agree, like, the whole, let's go to, and look, I love going to dinners, and some clients still want to do that, and that's great. But it's not, that's all changing. It's not there yet. You still have, there are plenty of old guard lawyers out there who are not happy with the way things are changing.
Sure. But then I also think the whole industry is changing too. Like, at some point, people, like, younger people are moving up, older people are retiring. I think COVID pushed retirement for a lot of people too. So, like, we were very similar. Like, I was 4 days remote, like, pre-COVID. And the only reason I went in one day a week was because I like to see people,
Exactly.
Or I'd have my lunches planned. I'd like to see my colleagues in the office, like that. That's why I went in. So it wasn't much different for us as a firm. It wasn't that different, when everyone went remote. I mean, there's always people, though, who like to work in the office, and they are more productive when they go into the office. I am not one of those people. I like to be home. I like to be in my space. I don't want to waste time commuting anywhere. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Me too. And that was my point. I was like, why am I driving an hour south? And this doesn't make any sense. But I couldn't, I ended up at another firm before I opened this firm. So it was two law firms. And I used to tell them they were like doing a whole office remodel, and they obviously, and there I was an equity partner, and I was like, well, listen, I don't want an office. I'd rather the money that you're going to spend on me for an office, I'd rather just pocket that. So I'll just have a permanent home office.
Yeah.
And they kind of flipped out. I was like, how am I not making you people understand? Like, listen, you'll spend less money on your overhead, and I'm spending an hour to 2 hours a day commuting. That doesn't include having to get up, clean up, take care of my dogs, that's all time that can be spent doing things that benefit the collective here from an earning money. And they could not wrap their heads around it. They just couldn't. They just were very much like, you have to be here because it fosters community and it fosters collaboration. And I was like, no, it doesn't. I was like, we can talk on the phone. Like, what are you talking about? And they couldn't get it. They just couldn't get it. And even today, like, I have some space that I go to, like, obviously you don't want to be home constantly. And my buddy and I are looking into buying a building. And even when I have to do that, I'm like, it takes, you got to get ready, right? You got to clean up, and you got to do all the things, and there's a time crunch. But if you're only doing it like once or twice a week, it's dramatically different.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes it is nice to like put on your, adult clothes.
Absolutely.
But I will say, I mean, I don't know what the Florida courts are like, but my practice is in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and I very much appreciate the move away from the in-person appearances for things that don't truly matter to be in person for.
We're doing it too. So we're Zoom for right now we're Zoom for everything minus jury trials. I actually have an in-person jury trial. I think that's going to go in March, so that'll be fun. But otherwise, we're Zoom for everything, and I love it. I mean, I've taken all my depots by Zoom. I actually don't know from a depot standpoint. I don't think I'm going to go back to in-person depots. It kind of makes no sense, right? Because sharing all the documents electronically, it's just so much easier.
Yeah.
But we're doing everything by Zoom. So we have these big like calendar calls or motion calendar. I'm sure you have something similar. And you put your shirt and put the suit on, right? But I have my basketball shorts underneath, and I sit here and I do other stuff, and then they call it and you do your thing, and it's great. It's great. And I don't think we'll go back to the other way.
I will say some things I've found to be effective in person. Like I recently, like I think it was a few weeks ago, I had an in-person mediation. And for that particular case, I wanted that mediation to be in person because I wanted to actually, the injuries of the plaintiff were visual. So I wanted to see those injuries in person.
Right.
And I wanted the mediator to see her in person. But that was a choice. Like that was a discussion like, hey, I think we should do this in person. Now, I've done plenty of successful mediations on Zoom and they were successful, but like when I have arguments on a summary judgment motion, I prefer those to be in person, but sometimes it's usually not my call, or it's never my call. It's the court's call.
Yeah. Mediation, I don't mind. And I like some mediations I think are better in person. Others I think can be done by Zoom. It just depends on what the situation is. I had one in New York City that I think, looking back, would have been better in person, but the other side wouldn't do it. So we were stuck with what we had. Some arguments I prefer to do in person for sure. So summary judgment definitely being one of those. Unfortunately, we just can't right now. So we're stuck with what we've got, but we'll see. I'll let you know how the jury trial goes, because that's going to go.
I am curious. We had in New Jersey last year, like they were pushing in-person jury trials. And I mean, I think some are going. I just think most are settling before they have to go anywhere.
I don't think we're settling. We're going to go. Well, we've got a summary judgment pending, so that's a whole separate conversation. But yeah, I think I like the Zoom stuff. I really do. Like I said, the depots in particular, I'm a huge fan. It makes life a lot easier.
So when you founded MLE Law, like, was it just you, or did you have someone else who started up with you?
No, it's just me, and it's really still just me. I think I said we earlier, but there really is no we. I'm the we.
It's you and your multiple personalities just come together.
Yeah. Some would say there are multiple personalities. I didn't even intend to go back out on my own. I mean, that's a whole separate conversation, but I did did found it on my own. And I mean, I guess you could kind of say I did it with my buddy, although he has his own practice. But I have my best friend from law school I told you about earlier. I mentioned his name. We became really close over the years as lawyers. He went to go work for kind of a well-known Miami Beach boutique firm. I went to my labor and employment firm. And then he kind of quickly rose through the ranks there at that firm and was an owner. He went out on his own in 2007. I was back in like as a traditional partner, but we were always in touch and we were trying to work together. So I tried to bring him into my prior firm.
Okay.
Because he had, a really significant book of business. But again, we ran up against this old guard and, they were ultimately fearful that if he came in, we would kind of be our own little unit doing our own thing. And the other people in South Florida, which was the team I had worked with, ironically, from my original firm, if that makes sense. I ended up going back to work with the same people that hired me. They did their own thing over the years together and ended up at this mid-sized firm in Florida. So I jumped to them in 2012, and in 2017 or 18, I tried to bring my buddy into that firm.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was they were tremendously fearful that if he came in, he and I would sort of form this little unit and kind of run amok, and they wouldn't be able to control us, which was
silly,
ridiculous. Yeah, the only thing we would have been running amok on is making tons of money for everybody.
Right.
And they couldn't see that and didn't get it, and so that fell apart. And then some other stuff happened at that firm. There was a big client that kind of wanted to make a change, but wanted to still work with me. And there was a whole bunch of stuff happening that always happens with lawyers.
Yeah.
So I went to my buddy and he was like, now's the time. He's like, and he said to me, I remember I called him. I was like, look, I got to talk. There's some stuff going down and I'm not sure how to play it. I'm not sure what to do. And I need some advice, because I was no longer this arrogant, dumb kid who thought he knew everything. Right. I mean,
you've grown up a little bit.
I'd like to think I evolved. Right. And so we have a sit down and he says, look, now's the time to do it. He's like, I was starting to build my social media presence. that was not sitting well with my prior firm. They were not thrilled. I was doing my first podcast. They were not thrilled with that either. I mean, I was doing it because they really couldn't stop me, but they were not happy.
Yeah.
There were some people there from really way back in the day that just couldn't. They were upset about my LinkedIn videos. They were just all of it. And he said, look, you can use my office, use my assistant. I'm going to bring you in on all these cases. Go, let's do this now. And there was a big client that wanted me to do it. So to go with them. So I thought about it for a night and I consulted my family, which consisted of, at the time, one dog. I said, what do you think, Max? Should we do this? She looked up at me and tilted her head, put her ears up, which I took to mean she was saying, sure, go for it. I'll support you. And I called my buddy up. I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I did. And that was it. With really no pre-planning.
Well, first of all, good for you. But also, isn't it funny the visceral reactions people have to putting things out there on social media in the business world?
Wow. Yes. We can talk about that. We talk a lot. I don't mean to, I'll give you an example. So one of the problems that I had at this firm was they had a PR firm, right, internally at the firm. And I would beg these people to come down and to work with me. Because I was like, I want to do everything. Like, I want to do all the things. And they would never come down and work. They would blow me off constantly. And finally, I found out the reason they blew me off is because they had a non-compete. They were doing PR for another labor and employment firm. And so they could not help our group at the firm. Yeah. The firm I was with did other things, which kind of sent me through the roof. I was like, what are we doing here? Now, to my former firm's credit, they were like, you're right. Go hire a PR firm. Well, you can go do it, do the interviews, just get the costs cleared. So there was a problem. I brought it to their attention. They solved it. Absolute, complete credit for that. So I get this PR firm. Now, remember, I'm a labor lawyer, right? And I love sports. So sports and labor law go hand in hand, right? Because unions and leagues and all that stuff. It's like, it's just such fodder for great content. And I post about that on LinkedIn all the time.
Yeah.
and Instagram and everywhere else. So this was right around the time of Colin Kaepernick and the kneeling and all that stuff, right? And so we hired the new PR firm, and Kaepernick sues the National Football League alleging collusion under the National Labor Relations Act, right? The whole idea being that the owners got together and said, nobody hire him because of his political beliefs. That's collusion and would ultimately be a labor law violation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get an interview with the New York Daily News through the PR firm, who I still use today for my firm, DeRay and Company. If anybody needs really good PR, they're the best. And I'm asked to comment on the legal challenge. So as a labor lawyer, at that time or whatever, 16, 17-year labor lawyer, whatever it is, I'm asked to comment on, do I think the claim has legs, right? What do I think? Not about politics, not about what I think about kneeling or any of those. Just, do you think this guy's got a case?
Sure.
And so I give my comments about what you need to do to prove up collusion, what he's going to have to find in discovery, if I think there's something there or not. And I don't even remember where I came down on that. And the article comes out, and that's exactly what's in the article. The reporter quotes me, and it's an analysis, but it's a big story and it's a big thing. And the article catches fire and trends on Twitter and trends on Google. And it's like a big deal. It's my first piece of national press. And it was great. My LinkedIn inbox was full, and I was getting all these texts from people. It was great. Yeah, it was awesome. And they have the firm's website in there. I mean, it's great, right? They backlink the firm. It's great. Yeah, I got chewed out for that. Oh yeah, they were upset, and they said to me, we would prefer you not comment on controversial issues because we're very conservative and traditional. And they don't mean conservative politically. They meant conservative, we keep things close to the vest.
Yes, sure.
And I was they're you can comment on stuff, but not on anything that's controversial. I said, so what you mean is I can comment on nothing? Well, no, because I'm sure there's union stuff going on. I said, listen to me. Nobody gives. Can I swear on this or no?
Oh yeah. People swear all the time.
I was nobody gives a shit about the dock workers strike in some wherever town where the union is fighting for better. Nobody cares about that in the national media. I'm not saying that doesn't matter to those people, but that's not a national story. I said, and by the way, did you read the article that I was quoted? It's a legal analysis. And what I came to find out was that some of my fellow partners didn't like that. They didn't read the article, and they thought I took a political stand, which I did not do.
Yeah.
And they were pissed that we were even associated with this controversy, which I thought was ridiculous. And then I did
squarely in your space.
Oh too, my God. Right? And yeah, it was are people adverse to getting business? What's wrong with you? And then I did my PR firm. This was now during the Me Too era, got me an editorial in, I want to say the Miami Herald, but it could have been the Daily Business Review, to comment on, as a labor and employment lawyer, my thoughts on the zero tolerance policies that were coming into existence during Me Too. And that kind of stemmed from something I had talked about in another paper. The New York Mets had a situation where they fired a guy. They fired two people, I think, for having an inappropriate conversation with each other that was sort of surreptitiously recorded by somebody. And they fired these guys under the auspices of a zero tolerance policy. So I write this article about why I think zero tolerance policies in the Me Too era are a mistake. Not that you shouldn't take this stuff very, very seriously, but my analogy, I believe, in the article was look, the speed limit says 55, but if you go 56, that's not the same as going 90. And the same thing is for any kind of sex harassment, an off-colored joke made because you're just dumb and don't know how to read the room is not the same as trying to rape somebody. It's not the same. And that article catches fire, and it's great. And so I do a video on LinkedIn from my car while driving. As you know, people do that all the time. It's a great time. And it gets a bunch of traction on LinkedIn. I get a phone call, and I'm essentially bitched out because some of my partners complained that I was doing a video while driving And that demonstrates that I and the firm that I'm associated with don't care about the law. It's like, what are you talking about? And I said to the person delivering this message, I was like, you are running a multi-million-dollar law firm, and this is what you're spending your time on, calling me about this. It was absurd. It was absurdity. Yeah. It was absurdity. And look, at the end of the day, and I wrote about this when I opened my own firm, I wrote a long article on LinkedIn about why after I had earned the most money ever in my career, I promptly quit and opened my firm. And I will say, and this is very important, it's okay for my prior employer or any employer to have all of those beliefs and all of those rules, for sure. That's their world. They were the people in charge. I was not in charge. And so it was either live, and that's why I left, because it was either live under that rubric or I would constantly be fighting something that I wasn't going to win. So it was either deal with it, because that's what you have to deal with when you work for someone, or do your own thing and do it the way you think it should be done. So it's not that their rules were wrong. I don't mean to say that, although I think it was a mistake, but whatever. It's just that if you don't want to do that, you got to go out on your own. And I think that's why you're seeing great lawyers. I'm not saying I'm a great lawyer, but I know other great lawyers that could be with firms that are not, because of situations similar to that, where they want to push content. They want to be much more open about what they do. And these firms they're not about that. There is this feeling in the industry we should sort of be seen but not heard. Now it's changing, but it's still very regulated. Like, I've talked with partners at firms, and they have teams that help them curate their content, and everything's got to be. I mean, look, the world is very different now. And what I find super interesting, I mean, I know this is a very long-winded answer, but one of the other problems was I was posting on Instagram and I was posting all this stuff. So they basically were like, look, you have to have your content reviewed before you post it, because you're posting on behalf of us and we need to review it. And I thought about that. I was like, it's pretty interesting. Nobody reviews my cases.
Right.
Right. You practice law. We don't care. Do that. You run your cases how they always say. You run your cases how you want to run your cases. Just don't make any mistakes. Okay, fine. And that's where you can cause millions of dollars of damage. But you can put something on Instagram, that's got to go through like 6 people. By the time it got through the 6 people, it was stale. It makes no sense.
Yeah. And also, like with the social media channels, a lot of it's like you make your content, and like it's either you want to get it out just then, like it makes sense to put your content out right when you make it, and once you get it reviewed, and then someone else chimes in, and now it's no longer your voice, and it's the message isn't always the same.
And it's got to be timely, right? Like it's got to be timely. So sometimes you just think about an idea and it hits you, and you're like, oh my God, this would be great. And if you have to have it reviewed by 80 people or whatever, it's not timely. Right. Now it's stale. The idea is gone, and can happen within hours. Yeah. So, all of that, I don't even know if you asked me why I left, but all of that combined into how I ended up where I am today.
I don't remember what the question was, but I like the answer. So let's stick with it. So we're almost out of time. I didn't want to run out of time before talking about your podcast, because how was it that it's not surprising to me after talking to you why you have a podcast and how you came to that. But I'm interested to hear in like your process going in, because by way of background, like this podcast, I didn't start this podcast. My managing partner started this podcast, and I thought she was crazy. And I told her, like, I was like, who is going to listen to this? Right. No one wants to listen to a legal podcast. And then she was like, and it's on video. I was like, oh God, and who's going to watch it? Like, this is crazy. And then fast forward, now I'm hosting the podcast, because I realized, like, for me, this was such a good creative outlet for me. And I love doing it, like, absolutely love doing it, which I was such a naysayer, back in, September of 2019, when I thought this was such a dumb idea. And now, I record 1 or 2 episodes a week. So, so I'm curious to hear your thought process going in.
Hey, look, a lot of people told me in my podcasts, both of them were dumb ideas. I don't I don't know if they still say that, but so I actually started podcasting, I think before everyone had a podcast, right?
Mhm.
So I was on this train early. I used to go to these spring training games with a lawyer buddy of mine, and we would have all these sports debates. And I was like, we should just do a podcast. He was like, what? I was like, yeah, we should podcast. He's like, a podcast? I was like, yeah, they have these things called podcasts. And like you talk and you put it out and people listen. And he was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be super cool. We're gonna do it. And that was, I don't know, 17, or I don't know, somewhere around there. It was before I can mark it by before the Patriots went to Super Bowl 52. That's how I mark it.
Yeah.
Like about a year before that. So I do no research. I figure, how hard could it be? Buy some microphones, stick them into the computer and record. Like, it can't be that difficult. So I go buy some microphones at Best Buy, figuring I know exactly what I'm doing, because I'm not really when I have an idea and I want to execute, I don't spend too much time, quote unquote, planning. I mean, I do, don't misunderstand me, but I think you can get paralyzed by analysis. Like, sometimes you just got to go.
Correct.
We go record this episode and it's terrible. And I put it out anyway. And it's awful. It's terrible audio. It's god awful. It's like the worst thing ever. And like, I create this logo that's terrible, and it's just all bad. But I quickly learn how bad it is, and that prompts me to figure out how to like cut audio. Like, I do for my show, I do all the mixing, all the intros, outros. I do it all myself. I learned how to do all that over a weekend, and so I end up putting out a bunch of shows with my buddy, just kind of talking sports. And through that, met a few people in the sports world, and then so it had nothing to do with my law practice. And then somebody that I have trusted over the years was telling me, he's like, the thing is, Mike, he's like, you have this podcast and people are listening to it. Not 20, 30,000 people, but whatever, there's people listening. He's like, but you're not connecting it to your business, right? And this was still when I was at my old law firm. He's like, you got to connect the two. That's what you got to do. You got to connect them. So I thought about that, and it made a lot of sense.
Right.
So that podcast with my buddy ended because I didn't want to just talk about sports every week. That's like a dime a dozen thing. And that kind of ran its course, and we had a great time doing it. So I started this second show, which is now the Q4 podcast, where I would go interview people and speak specifically about the intersection between business and sports, and tailored it more to what I'm doing. So, and that's gotten me in the room with some pretty amazing people in the world of sports and business that I don't think I ever would have met but for the show. And it's a great marketing arm of my law firm. The show's on the law firm website. And that's how it started. And now it's still going. Now, look, everybody has a podcast now. So it's much harder for me to get guests, right? Because I was getting some of these guests because they didn't have a lot of places to go. And I sort of offered this sort of easy thing. Now, most of them either have their own show or they can go on there's a podcast for everything now. So I might pivot it a little bit to more law stuff. Kind of like what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. You do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can. Like, we've evolved too. I mean, we've changed over time. I've experimented with other things in the mix that didn't work, or, it is, it's a process. It's going through it, and you learn as you go, and I think there was a time like a year ago, I felt like this podcast was a little lost. Like, we were all over the place. Now we're like in a different, like, we've pivoted a little bit, and you just have to be able to do that. Just like you have to be able to do that in business, and how you run your practice. I'm sure you've had to pivot. Always pivoting, and always saying to myself, well, if it doesn't work, that's okay. Like, I'll try something different. Like, I went for a few months without a guest because I was basically slammed at work, and I panicked a little bit, and I was like, wait a minute, why am I panicking? Like, it's my show. Like, it's okay if there hasn't been a guest. Like, what am I panicking about? I get it. And then, I put out an episode a couple of weeks ago. So I think podcasting's fun. Most importantly, for me, at least, I enjoy it. I enjoy playing with the audio and mixing in fun little things. And I enjoy conversations like this that we know other people are going to listen to. Hopefully, that provides some value to somebody. It's a great medium to get your voice out there and to talk about issues like what we've talked about in our industry, with social media and partnership and all sorts of great stuff. But people kind of snickered when I did it.
for sure. They were like, what? Um,
Yeah. I mean,
and that's okay.
I was a snickerer, so
Yeah.
and now, and now look at me. But I mean, I had similar thing like with when we started really pushing content on LinkedIn and video content. I mean, there were a lot of negative people. A lot of people said negative things like, why would you do that? It's so stupid, you know? And I was hesitant too, because I was hesitant for myself. It took me probably 45 minutes to film my first 1 minute video because I had to retake it a bazillion times.
Yeah.
But then once you got comfortable, I was like, why do I care? I'm not,
Right.
you know, like, am I offending anybody? If I am, I'm not saying anything that I don't believe in. So if I'm
Right.
offending them by that, then sorry, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, am I offending you by like putting myself out there? And I think that's like a lot of people, I think they are very negative about it because they wouldn't do it themselves. So
I
they don't understand
completely
why you do
agree.
it.
Look, I think they shit on it because they're afraid.
Mhm.
That's the bottom line. They're afraid and they're not celebratory of other people doing things that are great, right? So like when I look at other lawyers, I look at a lot of other lawyers' content that are doing it better than I'm doing it, right? I think anyway. And I get a lot of lawyers that come to me about putting out content that tell me, oh my God, you do all this great content. That's fine. But then I go and look at other lawyers and I'm like, wow, they've got it together. But I don't get jealous of that or fearful. I look at that. I'm like, well, how do I do that? What are they doing that I can do? Because what they're doing is helpful to me. So I'm going to try to emulate or take bits and pieces from whatever they're doing. Like, but the people that are sort of like shitting on those of us out there putting content, those of us pushing this system to change, those of us saying like, look, lawyers do not have to be seen but not heard. We should be heard. We should be talking about things going on. We should be putting out content, audio, video, whatever. We should be making fun of ourselves, which I do in my little This is MLE Law video series where I kind of mock the This is Sports Center commercials. People that think that's bad, they're certainly entitled to that. But let's be real, that's coming from a place of fear. That's coming from a place of, I don't like it because I wouldn't do it. I don't like it because I recognize this is the trend. This is what people are paying attention to. And the biggest criticism I always used to get, and this happened a lot before I went out on my own, was, well, what business are you really going to get from that? And now I'm out giving seminars about how you get business from content, right? So
exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, and I can say, I sat in the other side being like, oh, like, this is so stupid. Why would I do this? And then, but I realized I was scared for myself. Like I was worried about what people might say or judge or whatever. And then I quickly realized that like was silly for me to waste time and energy worrying about that. And then when I saw how it was like working for me, and then like, especially even this podcast, like I love having people on and talking to them just like I'm talking to you. And I find my guests love to come on and talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then people love to listen to them talk. So I'm like, what's wrong with any of this? So,
I mean, we all carry a little narcissism with us, right? Like we all want to hear ourselves talk a little bit. I mean, I freely admit that. And this is a great avenue for great medium for it. And so I celebrate people that are putting out content, and I don't shit on anybody's content. I think everybody that's doing it, it's hard to do. Once you start doing it, you have to feed the machine. You can't, it doesn't work if you do it once a week. You got to keep doing it. And it's not easy because you do have people like we sort of talked about offline. People are going to troll you a little bit, and you're going to get some of that. So you got to have some thick skin. But at the end of the day, if you don't want to be a dinosaur in this business, you have to be putting content out. It's just that simple.
And I think that's like the underlying theme to this is, the legal world is evolving, and, we have to evolve with it, or you just get stuck behind, and you have to decide where you want to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some fight with that evolution for sure. I still think the old guard doesn't like this. But that's okay. They don't have to. No. They should recognize that some of the people that would have hired them are going to hire the people that they're seeing online now, much more so than somebody who is behind a desk somewhere in an office somewhere that's not heard of. We'll see.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing, your background story. I think,
Thanks.
why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you and, tune into your podcast, get your content, and they find you on Instagram and TikTok and everywhere. So let them know.
Thanks. Yeah. And I appreciate you having me. This was tons of fun and I really enjoyed it. So if anybody wants to follow what I'm doing, you can find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn by my name, Michael Elkins. And MLE Law is also on LinkedIn. And then Instagram is at Melkins1, the number 1, and then at MLE_law, although the Melkins1 account is the primary account. Twitter at Melkins31175. Yeah, 31175. And TikTok is at Melkins1. And then my website is right there, MLElawfirm.com.
Yeah, I have to say, I didn't even scratch. I was actually going to get into substantive stuff, but I actually just love. I had some stuff real legal stuff, but I'm like, we don't need that.
Nobody wants to hear that anyway.
We could talk about that next time.
Yeah, for sure. Nobody wants to hear boring legal stuff anyway. They want the gossip.
I know. I agree. But thank you so much for coming on, and for all my listeners out there. If you like what you hear, always subscribe to the Defense of Arrest on Apple Podcasts, and you can find us on our new YouTube channel, TDNR Podcast. So keep listening in.
Oh, can I plug my pod real quick? I think
do it.
Yeah, it's called the Quarter 4 Podcast, where we cover the intersection between business and sports by talking to some of the most influential people in the industry and finding out their tools for success. And that's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods.
Yes. So make sure you tune in.